people in chat are asking like what I think could be done to fix the Israel-Palestine. There is no solution that's going to make people happy. There is no way to get, well, you know what the Palestinian people deserve? All of it back. Do you know what Israeli citizens deserve? To not be kicked out of the land they were born in. These two desires are completely irreconcilable. There is literally no way to make everyone happy. Whatever's going to happen is going to leave a lot of people upset, and honestly, a lot of people hurt. Like, that's inevitable. And you know why that's happening? Thank Israel and thank Britain. Like, you know, that they are the original progenitors of this suffering. They are the people who have spawned it. It was guaranteed suffering that was set in the earth like a seed and has grown to a mighty tree of suffering. And the only, like, the tree can grow, the tree can be rooted, the tree can be burnt down. People are going to suffer no matter what happens. Personally, I think that ending the occupation, even though that could go wrong in many ways, will produce vastly less suffering than letting the status quo persist. The U.S. is sending a task force to help Israel. Yeah, Posadistan, didn't you say you're going to link that we're sending like a naval fleet or something? There is nothing that we can do to like change the outcome of what's going on right now. The U.S. is moving their forward carrier strike group, consisting of a deck of warplanes and about 5,000 sailors, to the eastern Mediterranean in a show of force meant to assist Israel. This is stupid. This is literally like a bunch of ragtag Hamas terrorists fly across the border fence with like paragliders and boat fans. It's like, all right, we're going to be deploying the forward carrier strike group. We have the firepower to level about 1/4 of the Earth's surface. We're going to park that on over by the edge of the Mediterranean and do nothing with it, obviously. It's just stupid LARP, wasting boat fuel. The only like possible legitimate reason to move this out here is because Egypt has threatened military reprisal if they feel Israel overcommits to their reprisal against Gaza. So Israel has to take Egypt's threat seriously, even though I don't think there's much likelihood they'll actually follow through on it. So like that's the only thing that it's really deterring. It's not the only thing we're sending over. 75 million in aid to Palestine. Oh, that's nice. 75 million is like an infinitesimally small fraction of what we've sent Israel, but okay. $75 million in weapons for Palestinians. No, of course not. Crucial food assistance. That's good. I mean, 75 million is a lot of food, right? Hopefully it makes its way there and doesn't, I don't know, get stopped at the border fence or whatever. And weapons to the Israelis. Yeah, we're giving them military support as well. It doesn't matter. Like, again, it's like a LARP. Like, this doesn't, the only thing of consequence here is like meant as a deterrent to Egypt or Iran reprising. But again, Israel is a nuclear nation. I really don't think that's going to happen. So it's just, they're saying the carrier group is a plan D for possible evacuation / humanitarian efforts. The Giga Ultra based outcome that isn't going to happen, but it would be cool if it did happen, would be if Israel commits so hard to the ethnic cleansing that America is like, all right, everyone, we're doing that World War II boat lift all over again. Give us your hungry and tired, all right? All you Palestinians, take refuge under the artillery strike range of the forward carrier strike group. You're going to carve out like a crescent from the Gaza Strip that their cannons can touch, and you're safe as long as you're there. None of this will happen, but it would make for a good, I don't know, Metal Gear Solid mission premise. Personally, I think Iran will test a nuclear weapon. Maybe one day, but Iran shouldn't have any nuclear weapons that are ready to use yet. They're still building that like underground mountain facility for enriching uranium. There's no way they have enough enriched uranium yet. I guess unless they got it from somewhere else. But even then, where'd they get it from? Already enriched? No, I don't. They shouldn't have anything. Russia? Maybe. I don't think the Russian government would give nukes to Iran. That would implicate them in ways that a lot of people would not. No, I don't think so. Guys, I don't think Iran would be committing to the construction of uranium enrichment facilities, which are very expensive, if they had like a commercial source of nuclear weapons. Yeah, people who are saying this is World War III, like, don't know what they're talking about. You guys need to dial the fuck down, okay? You're doing that meme where it's like, there's the big world map and there's an explosion somewhere 8,000 miles away, and then there's a white woman in Minnesota who's like, oh my god, I'm so scared. Please dial it down, okay? I don't know, like, I don't know if you think Hamas is a nuclear power, but the thing that leads to World War III is two nuclear nations fighting. That's the big problem, right? That's the thing. you know? And that's not on the table here. Even if Egypt got involved, they're not nuclear. Egypt hates Gaza, Lamau. Well, no, it's complicated. Egypt is kept open like a port of travel between the Gaza Strip and itself, and they defend, no, they don't defend Palestinians. They view the Gaza Strip and the oppression of the Palestinians as a useful political tool to justify their hatred of Israel. That's the closest, yeah. I'm curious, let's assume these 2 days never happened. What's the appropriate response from Palestine to the situation that could have changed the path? Honestly, unfortunately, the only way for Palestine to like achieve freedom is probably through a lot of suffering, like no matter what. Because the problem is that like as far as I can tell, and as far as like what seems to be the case is that like Israel just wants them dead and gone, and that everything that's happening is just sort of like incremental steps down a long road where the only end point of the path is the eradication of the Palestinian people. So I'm operating on the assumption that diplomacy is a non-starter. Like Israel has indicated plenty of times in the recent past that they cannot be like negotiated out of the current path they've taken. So outside of that, it seems like I have no idea. Like extremely mass coordinated, protests, sort of mass waves of people moving to the fence, getting gunned down. But they've tried that before, didn't they? Try that? I don't know. The problem is that like unfortunately, like this is one of the situations where we're being doomed. I mean, maybe you could imagine they do it better, like they do an even better job. Like what if they did this thing they've tried before, but they do it even better? Look, I'll say this much, okay? Given the like circumstances and how bad things have been, Hamas may have done bad, but I definitely can understand why like some disaffected, poor, barely even able to access clean drinking water kid in Palestine would think they have nothing they can do other than join Hamas, right? Like that's the end goal of the Israeli government's policies. You destroy all hope. So of course the only like actions left people feel they can take are to just throw their arms up and join a Islamic jihadist group. Like we did the same shit with ISIS. We've done this before. We've done this shit before. The same pattern has played out multiple times. We know what happens. And by the way, I just want to be clear, okay? If any outside entity did to a group of Americans what Israel has done to Palestine, those encaptured Americans would be the most terrorists the world has ever seen, okay? If there was like an area the size of, I don't know, like North Carolina that got conquered and slowly pushed into an area about the size of like the city of Seattle with 2 million people there, and it was clear diplomacy wasn't going to work, and all the leaders of the political group that's like corralled them into that tiny space are arguing like basically eliminationist policies, the tide of violence spreading from that concentrated group of Americans would be biblical. It would not be, it would be unimaginable, you know? And we would all sympathize with them. They would be the good guys in that story. Like, obviously. If you take the raw facts of the story with Palestine and Israel, the Gaza Strip, and like all of the specifics of what's happened, and you leave out the proper nouns, the names, and you just like transcribe it into like, I don't know, a fantasy story or like a sci-fi story, whatever, it's obvious who the good guys are. And when there's some giant bloody revolution led by the oppressed people, that's clearly the good thing happening. Like this is a premise so obvious and straightforward that even children's books like repeat it. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Hunger Games stories, these are like so morally uncomplicated that even in media intended for children, it's still understood that violence is an acceptable means of achieving freedom. Like even that's how simple it is morally, and that's what's happening here. It really is that simple. The problem is that even if in the abstract violence would be a justified way of achieving freedom, that doesn't mean that all violence is capable of achieving freedom, and there are bad ways to do violence. Again, to really hem in on how like simple the morality of this is, in Avatar: The Last Airbender, this is not meant to be like, well, this is soy, I suppose. I just wanted to be clear how like straightforward this is, because everyone acts like the Israel-Palestine conflict is really complicated, but morally, it's like the simplest thing in the universe. You know what I mean? It's like Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine and Russia is historically and logistically complicated. Morally, it is incredibly uncomplicated. You know, the morality of the Ukraine-Russia conflict could be explained to and understood by a 6-year-old, and they would understand it sufficiently. Like it is that straightforward. And likewise, like, I don't know, in The Last Airbender, you understand broadly the narrative that revolutionary violence against the Fire Nation is justified, but then early on, you have an example of an Earth Kingdom freedom fighter called Jet who commits indiscriminate violence against civilians and is justly condemned by the narrative of the story, early on sort of indicating that there are lines that separate and acknowledge the difference between just and unjust violence, you know? Yeah, Jet was a Hamas militant. He was a jihadist, many such cases. So, like, the reason I'm saying this, again, it's not like, oh, it's like with Thanos or whatever. It's just, like, it really is quite simple. If the Palestinians were able to engage in a mass wave of violent revolutionary action, which freed their people and broke the back of the Israeli government, that would lead to a lot of innocent people dying, but it would be, if done correctly, or at least somewhat correctly, almost certainly morally justifiable. Because if you don't believe that that would be morally justifiable, you don't believe in the concept of, like, self-defense, right? Like, if that's the case, then you have to oppose all war, all conflict, all the time. But Israel is constantly getting into wars on the pretext of self-defense. Like, they've done it like half a dozen times over the course of their existence. So if you don't believe that violence in perceived self-defense is a justifiable way of freeing people, then you can't support the Palestinians or the Israeli state, which is an incoherent position, right? In reality, people will just say it's okay for the groups they like to do violence and not okay for the groups they don't like to do violence. Violence, obviously, is undesirable and should be avoided when possible, but the only institution with the power to change things without the use of violence would be Israel. And again, Israel has indicated they don't believe in diplomacy as a way of resolving this, because their resolution isn't something they need diplomacy for, just soldiers. Playing devil's advocate for a second, they are literally surrounded by hostile Muslim-majority countries. You know which group of people is surrounded by a hostile, different ethnic and religious group as well? That's the thing, okay? If you believe that Israel has the right to defend itself and engage in defensive wars against their aggressive neighbors, then you necessarily have to afford that same privilege to Palestinians. The difference, of course, being that while Israel is not under immediate threat by their outside neighbors and is militarily capable of defending itself and has control of its own resources and border, the Gaza Strip has none of those things. They have no control over their resources, no control over their border. They don't have the ability to defend themselves against Israel, and they are slowly but constantly losing land. So Israel has been much more successfully aggressive against Palestinians than any group has been to Israel. Israel has fought wars with its neighbors and won. Israel has the power and prestige and money to negotiate, to defend itself to the people outside their borders who hate them. Again, the Palestinians do not have this privilege when it comes to dealing with Israel. It's not fair, is the lesson here. It's not fair. It's an appropriate conflict to feel doomer over. Though don't feel doomer if you're Palestinian, because if you feel doomer when you're Palestinian, you'll probably join Hamas, and that won't fix anything. Israel has had to fight for its existence several times. It barely won in 1973. Are you listening to me? Are you listening to what I'm saying? Isn't it fair to call out this attack, though, because the violence in this instance is against civilians? If you were listening just a few minutes ago, I specifically described how, in an analogy where I was describing moral simplicity meant to be understood by children, even in that instance, there was a example of violence against civilians being condemned by the narrative. If you were listening, you would have heard me say that. It just sucks to see so many normies siding with Israel when public perception's moving against them lately. Well, stay strong. Public perception will move back towards Palestinian people if we are steadfast enough. We should probably also, like, decrease the amount of time that we spend talking about lefties who irrationally defend Hamas, in large part because the ultimate goal of our beliefs is to promote support for Palestine. And it's difficult to do that if we're constantly fixating on the dipshits on our side of things. Why are there so many Indians siding with Israel? Because they hate Muslims. Indian nationalists hate Muslims. They despise Muslims more than you could possibly imagine. And they think that Israel is based because they're like they run like a concentration camp for Muslims, basically. Even though there are a lot of Christian Palestinians, but, you know, whatever.
Well, I'm now joined by Fleur Hassan Nahum, who's the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. When you look at the number of deaths, the number of people held hostage still, do you believe that the intelligence and security services have this situation under control or not?
Well, they certainly didn't yesterday morning when there was an attack in 7, 8 different
Gamer
points on a
chair.
border which is supposed to be properly secured. It's a border of a country going into another country because Israel, as your reporter misinformed, the public has not been in Gaza since 2005. You can talk about a blockade, but you can't talk about an occupation. Israel left Gaza in 2005.
Bullshit semantics. They wall Gaza in from every side. Like it meaningfully, it is an occupation. It is meaningfully an occupation in its consequences.
Had free and fair elections at least once. Hamas was elected by the people over Fatah, and they've been ruling the Gaza Strip for the last 10, 11 years.
Yeah, but
and so we actually have a proper border.
Yeah, but it's been blockaded.
Gaza.
It's been blockaded for 16 years, and there is now untold.
Can you believe the conditions that Israel created in Gaza did not lead to like a perfect civil society that led to like perfect democratic outcomes?
Suffering in Gaza as there is among the Israelis dead. You know, this is something that this bloodshed is now, it's just appalling to watch, isn't it? Do you agree with that statement?
Gaza has two borders, one with us and one with Egypt. In fact, in the last few months, and this is why this was surprising to us in Israel, we've been increasing the amount, at Hamas's request, we've been increasing the amount of work permits for Gazans to come into Israel to do an honest day's work, because, you know, Hamas take the international...
An honest day's work. Yeah, I'm sure there aren't, you know, there are 2 million people in the Gaza Strip. They're doing plenty of work inside their borders as well. What a piece of shit. Oh yeah, we've been kindly giving those savages the opportunity to do a real job over here in Israel.
National aid that they get, and they build weaponries and tunnels instead of actually developing an economy or anything good for their people, including hospitals and schools.
But you know there are civilians in there who are unable to leave, and they're being urged to leave now. Well, where are they supposed to go? Where are they supposed to go? The 2 million people in Gaza.
And where are the people in the south of Israel supposed to go?
They're in Israel. They can go anywhere. What do you mean? They're in Israel. There's like airports and boutiques with expensive cupcakes. They're in Israel. They can travel. They're not blockaded.
The militants that came into Gaza yesterday morning came in with one goal, and that was to kill innocents. When Israel goes in to destroy terrorist infrastructure, innocents, unfortunately, are the casualties of war. And let me tell you, the people in the building that you reported about all got an SMS message saying, please leave the building. We're about to bomb it because there is terrorist infrastructure in that building.
Can you imagine just chilling with your family and then at like 6 a.m., you get a text and it's like, yeah, get out like really quick. The plane already launched. Good luck. And then they died.
What we have here is a double war crime. The Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, which is ISIS, which is an arm of the Iranian government, come in to kill innocent Israelis, and we go...
She literally just said civilians dying is the cost of war, and now she's literally like in the same breath.
Let me warn their innocence.
Okay, let me talk about those innocent. Let me talk about the innocent Israelis that you've just mentioned. Some of whom are now held hostage.
Yes.
Given the security failings?
Wait a second. Is this the same lady who had that disastrous interview with Jordan Peterson? It is, isn't it? Oh yeah. 6 years later.
You've alluded to yourself. Should the security minister resign? Do you think?
Well, I'm not in the cabinet and I can't make those decisions.
No, but I'm just asking for your opinion.
I'm a local politician. Look, I think that at the moment we have to get the situation
cowardly, no comment, yeah.
Out of control, in control. We have to restore calm. We have to get the people that have been taken hostage back. And then...
Listen, how do you do that?
We have to have an investigation on what happened here.
Right. And how do you get the hostages back safely? Because some of them have been taken to Gaza now. Is a ground offensive there the only option, or is that fraught with difficulty? And might you be better negotiating with Hamas, for example?
Well, I don't think Hamas is an honest organization to negotiate with, especially when everybody knows that they're the long arm of the Iranians. And if you ask me why this is happening, it's because Israel was making incredible advance towards peace with Saudi Arabia. There's a bigger picture here. And everybody else, all these innocent people on both sides, have been used as pawns.
So is a ground offensive into Gaza, in your view, the only realistic option to have any prospect of bringing some of those hostages back?
Well, I don't see how an air campaign can bring hostages, which
I mean, sorry, indiscriminate bombing can't bring hostages back. So, you know,
is now probably 100, more than 100. Some people say hundreds of hostages back. It's very, very sad. The situation is sad. I'm close to this lady who's can't find her son already for 36 hours. He was at, ironically, a peace festival nearby at the rave. And at the moment, we're in a situation where there are so many mothers and fathers who can't find their children. It is absolutely tragic what's going on in Israel right now, inhumane what's going on.
Fleur Hassan Nahum, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, here with me now is the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Hussam Zomlot, who's a senior member of Fatah, the party which controls the Palestinian Authority and is a political rival of Hamas.
hello.
Ambassador, you heard there about the people missing, the hostages taken, the mothers, the elderly...
Holy shit. He looks so unhappy.
About the people missing, the hostages taken.
Oh my God.
The mothers, the elderly women, children taken hostage. Will you condemn this atrocity by Hamas?
Kathy, I have had this question as a first question in every interview I did, and I refuse to answer that question because it is the reason why we as an international community have failed to depict the situation as it is. The business of always being obsessed with blaming the victim, the occupied, the colonized, the besieged, when in fact I didn't see you asking her to condemn. I didn't see you.
But
I did not hear your first question to condemn the killing of an entire family that your reporter.
No,
I
think he should condemn, but at the same time, I do understand his frustration that, like, the language of condemnation is not brought up when Palestinian, or sorry, when the IDF or Palestine or whatever, like, kills Palestinians, or when Israel does this, that, the other. It's like, well, why do we do this? What about this? But it's never like, get an Israeli on the phone. Do you condemn the attacks on whatever? So I do get the frustration. I was on Twitter earlier and just like, because right now, criticizing Israel in any capacity gets you a bunch of dumb who are like, oh, so why do you think it's based to murder civilians? And there was one guy who replied to what I said, saying like, so you would have defended 9/11 too. So I replied, what is Blood waffling about? And he replied, do you or do you not condemn 9/11? Yes or no? And like, I'm not answering that. F you. What the f do you mean? Why? There's not a rational question to ask in response to the prompt you've been given. You know? Like, if you, like, like, imagine if, like, every time there was, like a black or, like, a civil rights leader or like, a BLM dude or whatever who went on TV to talk to a reporter, and the reporter was like, do you condemn this black gang murdering this white woman? It's like, what the f are you... Like, that being said, I do think there's more of a disconnect in that example than there is here with regards to the condemnation of Hamas. I also do wonder about, like, whether or not he can condemn Hamas. Because this guy, I mean, he's part of the Palestinian Authority, right? Like, would he face violent consequences? You know what I mean? I'm not sure.
Her on the people who are losing their lives in Gaza, and I'm asking you about the people who have lost their lives, the Israelis who have lost their lives.
It's tragic. It's tragic.
And you condemn that?
He lives in the UK because he's an ambassador. Yeah, but doesn't he? He's a part of the representative of the other party, right? Like, it's possible that what he says might, like, lead to consequences that could get people hurt. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating there. I mean, Hamas is like a dangerous group. They're a terrorist group. They do kill people who fight against them internally, right? They're not like, you know, they're not like internally to the Gaza Strip, like a peaceful civil society or whatever.
Atrocity.
And this has to stop. And this approach by the international Western media has to stop also. There is no way we can draw symmetry. The one side that is responsible fully on this is the occupying power. You cannot draw symmetry between militant groups and what you call here in the West the only democracy in the Middle East.
But this was an unprovoked attack. There were people at a peace festival, at a music festival. Could be hundreds dead there, young people. They had no quarrel in this. They had no skin in this game. Why did they have to die?
Kathy,
So I think that's a really question to ask. This guy is part of the opposition party to Hamas, and you're still like, why did all these innocent people have to die? Like, that's so loaded. Like, why would you? Because the implication by framing it that way is like this guy pressed the button on attacking the peace festival or whatever, or getting the civilian, you know, like that. The framing here assigns a lot of responsibility and sort of denigrates the whole conversation by making it about like purely this act and not like the broader context around it. It's pretty weird, but he's probably going to fumble the question too, so I don't know.
The task here is to represent my people. This isn't about Hamas. This isn't about the last 48 hours of what the Israelis have seen. My people have been seeing the same over a period of 75 years.
Okay, that was a pretty okay response. He's not here as a representative of Hamas. He's here as a representative of the Palestinian Authority. You know, I'm here to talk about my people, and my people are not Hamas like insurgents. My people are the suffering of Palestine, you know?
This is about a Palestinian people, more than 13 million of us, that have been denied our very basic rights for almost a century.
Okay, I think that's pretty good, because again, the temptation might be to go like, I denounce Hamas and all their stuff, leaving outside all the complexities, like the possibility of there being reprisal or like retribution for that. It's also like you don't want the conversation to be focused on that, and it's kind of that it starts focused on that as well, right? Like what Hamas has done in the past 48 hours is just a tiny fraction of the suffering that Israel has institutionally inflicted on Gaza with the backing of the Western world. So while it is bad what Hamas did, you know, like this guy did not come here to show, this guy didn't come here to be like a little dancing monkey with a hat and say like, haha, we denounce Hamas, haha, we denounce Hamas. He came here to talk about like the vastly larger ongoing occupation of Palestine. And these two are tied together, of course, because ending the occupation is how you end the violence. So that is what he wants to focus on, and it's clear in the language he chooses.
But I'm asking you, as a human being, would you urge Hamas to release those hostages? As a human being?
As a human being, I urge that people's legitimate rights are respected.
And that includes the hostages, because after all, taking hostages is illegal in international law.
I wish safety to everybody. But do you know, Kathy, that Israel has taken 2 million people in Gaza hostages for the last 6
years. See, you can tell by the way he laughs when he says that he's like kind of offended by the audacity of hyperfixating on Hamas's behavior when it pales in comparison to the broader context of the problem. It's yeah, okay, the Hamas thing is bad. Like, oh my God, like look at what's like going on, you know?
People in Gaza hostages for the last 16 years.
And you heard me asking the deputy mayor that very question.
And I haven't heard any in the Western media or the international politicians, really, the outcry about that. So it's practically, ironically, it's hostages taking hostages.
Well, I did tackle the lady in Jerusalem over that very point. But look, the attack by Hamas has now prompted this mighty vengeance, as Israel is calling it. The people of Gaza are the ones who are going to suffer. Your people are going to suffer. So how do you bring this bloodshed to an end? How do you play your part in that?
By giving my family in Gaza, because they are in Gaza.
Like, I mean, I think it's pretty clear from the language that she offered, right? Like her question to the lady from Jerusalem, do you think that like a ground invasion is necessary? Like, what about the innocent Palestinians who will be hurt? And the lady is like, yeah, we might have to do a ground invasion. Also like, yeah, we texted them before we blew up their apartment building. And it was like pretty much just like that, right? Like there was nowhere near the sort of emphatic emotional language on, do you condemn this hurt? You know, how could you do this or whatever? Or like, do you denounce this behavior? The differences are subtle, but they're meaningful, and they sort of signify the default moral culpability that we assign in situations like this, where it is the oppressed who is asked again and again to answer for every mistake, every injustice made, while the oppressor is just, their behavior is just accepted as a default from which we at most occasionally disagree or tut-tut.
Hope, horizon.
Where is the
prospect? Yeah, that's the question the Israelis need to ask themselves.
I'm asking you that question.
No, that's not for me. Our people have been struggling for 100 years. Our people.
That's true. The Palestinians are not the ones who are currently responsible for creating hope. Their hopes have been dashed time and time again by Israel. If Israel wants the fighting to end, they need to provide that path forward. They need to provide a way, because so far all Israel has done is make things worse and worse and worse, and threaten to make things even more worse if the Palestinians act up.
But look, you know what is so tragic as well is this supremacist thinking in Israel that they could go and wreak havoc everywhere. They could attack Palestinians, kill them, round them without charge or trial. They could steal our land. They could desecrate our holy places. They could besiege people for years. And then they ask why this is happening.
But there's the same, there's the same
epitome
attitude.
of racism.
But there's the same attitude by Hamas, right?
This is exactly what I mean about appropriately framing the conversation, because the attitude she's taking is this like, well, isn't hate bad? Isn't violence bad? It's like, yes, but what about systemic analysis, right? Like, you know, what caused these conditions?
700 Israelis have lost their lives.
This is the epitome of racism. If we really want to nail it down, this is a moment that serves as an alarm, a wake-up call for all of us. There is no way around the Palestinian people and our issue. There is no way but to end this occupation. There is no other route but to enforce international law and international legitimacy.
Okay, but how does your party, Fatah, bring some pressure on Hamas? Do you talk to Hamas, for example?
See, look at this. He keeps trying to frame it to the broader issue, and she's like, so what are you doing to stop Hamas? No moral weight or culpability being placed on Israel. It's this guy's responsibility to... you're a good Palestinian, aren't you? Aren't you a good Palestinian? Well, then you should be dealing with those uppity Hamas people in your group, shouldn't you? Like, aren't they making things worse for everyone? And of course, they are, but there's another larger, more powerful group that's also making things much, much, much worse. And that's what this guy is trying to talk about, and she won't let him.
My party has been the party that has led the Palestine national movement. Mm-hmm. My party started the armed resistance long before Hamas. And then we gave up that and we committed to three things: recognizing Israel, committing to negotiations and nonviolence, and committing to international law and resolutions.
Are you talking to Hamas now? Are you urging restraint?
Literally, like, that's all she wants to talk about. It is like, it's like sliding off of her like a glass pane. Like, no matter what he says, he's leading into a point, no matter what argument or what framing, because, and this is like the default reaction by Western media, nothing can challenge the fundamental assumption of Israeli hegemony. No matter what, this has to be framed as like uppity Palestinians up of, oh, well, will good Palestinians stop the bad Palestinians? It is indistinguishable from the way that racist right-wingers frame black-on-black violence here in the United States, where black people commit a disproportionate amount of crimes due to a wide range of socioeconomic conditions that lead to worse conditions in the environments where black people grow up, where it's more difficult for them to find social attainment or jobs, so there's a higher proportional likelihood that they might, say, join a gang or get involved in the drug trade. And then you look at that and you go, so you, good black person, what are you doing to stop black violence? Look at this black violence that's happening. And the good black person's job is to look at that and say, yes, that is black violence, and I think we should do it less. I, the good black, am saying to the bad blacks that they should cut it out. When, of course, in reality, this cycle, this engagement, this mode of addressing racial bias or racial violence, not only does it not work, it actually perpetuates the conditions that lead to that disparity. Do you condemn the rioting? Well, yes, the rioting is not good, but we must remember that it is a symptom of a greater social sickness. Do you condemn the rioting? I just said the rioting isn't good, but I want to focus this conversation on the way in which institutional policies that we've committed to have led to these. Do you condemn the rioting? Like, it's like every time. I just always remember, you just learn to identify this kind of propagandizing. Everyone here understands what I'm talking about, right? Everyone here understands. Nobody, no dipshit watching right now is interpreting this as a moral defense of Hamas or anything like that, right? We all fully understand what's going on here, right? The reason, the fact that what I'm talking about is not immediately identifiable to most people is why they do it. Propagandizing and narrative peddling are most effectively done when they're done in ways that don't make people feel like they're consuming bullshit.
That was 30 years ago. We did that.
Okay, but not now? You have no leverage.
Israel was expected to do one thing, end its occupation, stop its colonization.
Right.
You know what happened. So
okay.
You come
Ambassador, I'm so sorry, we're out of time.
Sorry. And all she wanted to do was get the good Palestinian to say that the bad Palestinian is bad, and he wanted to talk about the broader systemic issue, so nope, she's not here for it. Nope, sorry.
Ambassador Zomlot, thank you very much for joining us. And on tomorrow's programme, we'll be speaking to Israel's ambassador to the UK. A 20-year-old British man is one of those who died in Yemen.
Yep. Can't wait to hear the Israeli ambassador's take on the issue.
Yesterday's attack. Nathaniel Young was serving in the Israeli army when he was...
Then literally like 2 seconds after shooing that guy off for not following your narrative, start doing like biopics on the people who were killed. Not, mind you, a bad thing to do. I have nothing against eulogizing the dead who died unjustly. However, sure does lean into the idea that there is one very specific narrative that you're willing to peddle on your broadcast, and the moment that guy made it clear he wasn't playing along with it, you go right back onto your regularly scheduled programming. That Twitter right now, didn't we recently see an article saying that Twitter is now more filled with misinformation than even Facebook? Yeah, it's worse than Facebook now. Look at this. Urgent news alert. Hamas militants are believed to have crossed the currently unenforced U.S. southern border with intent to carry out attacks in U.S. soil. Many opportunities to increase border security were passed up on for political purposes. Now the consequences of such dire inaction are reaching a critical new level. And yeah, dude, Hamas militants filmed this right at the southern border. The Rio Grande is just right over here. Yeah, this is them getting ready to cross the southern border. What a joke of a website. It's literally, like, seriously, the vast majority of news that is cycling around on Twitter right now is blue check marks baiting engagement by posting AI images or videos from different conflicts, often years ago, that have nothing to do with what's going on right now, and making claims. It's not just random users, it's politicians too. Like everyone has basically decided that this is just like a monetization zone for misinformation, and they have committed entirely to that. Here, Elon Musk recently promoted 2 Twitter accounts that here, for following the war in real time, War Monitors and Scent Defender are good. So these accounts are both blue checks that just lie openly and will say anything. They'll post AI generated videos. They'll post videos from different like Middle Eastern conflicts and say, oh, confirm this just happened. And then Elon deleted the post, presumably because one of those people, it turns out, is Hitler. Went back just a few months to find this one. So directly promoted by the owner of Twitter, a Nazi who just posts fake shit for monetization and engagement. He later, Elon deleted it. I saw somebody who posted a video of babies kept in cages, and the message was, Hamas kept these babies in cages. Look, Hamas has kidnapped these babies. They're in cages. And then the response, or like the community note, was like, this isn't Hamas kept them in cages. It's IDF keeping Palestinian babies in cages in Gaza. And then it turned out that was wrong. It was Libyan. The community notes was wrong. That was wrong. It was a different video, actually. It wasn't even in Israel. It was a whole different thing. There's just stay off Twitter. Just completely stay off Twitter. The only thing that you can get off of Twitter informationally is the opinions of people who are directly stating their own opinions. That is it. If you want to know anything from Twitter, it is you go to a person's Twitter account and you see them tweet something, and then that is what they think, and that is the only thing you can get from it. It is by far the worst platform on I was about to say on Earth. I mean, I'm sure there are worse like on Earth, but for mainstream media accessible to us, this is by far as bad as it gets. The person who owns Twitter, Elon Musk, is not only blind to the misinformation, but actively revels in it. It will promote it directly and openly. It is as bad as it can possibly be. I imagine it is horrible. Hamas fighters infiltrate Israeli cities. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Thanks. Because Twitter doesn't censor the shit out of everyone? No, because Twitter has a monetization system where you make money based on how many views you get. So spreading misinformation in a system where people will often quote tweet to dunk on things that are not true is actually a really bad, like, toxic incentive. And also Elon Musk deliberately promotes people who spread misinformation, and blue check marks used to verify people's authenticity, and now they're just like the paid system. So, like, no, it has nothing to do with censorship. Previous Twitter did not censor people. Like, people act like before Elon, a bunch of people got banned. You had to be really bad to get banned on pre-Elon Twitter. Like, really, really bad, you know? And people still get banned on Twitter. Juniper's had her 3rd account banned. A glorious soldier, a revolutionary vanguardist, lost in the war against misinformation. All Juniper did was post true things. Oh yeah, a great way to get banned on Twitter is to argue with TERFs, because they will mass report everyone who they disagree with. Anyway, yeah, just seriously, do not engage with information on Twitter. You seriously use news sites and Google, okay? Citizen journalism is dead. I mean, it's dead. Genuinely, it's dead. The only thing that you can get out of Twitter informationally is a direct like engagement with what some person thinks, but when it comes to news or whatever else, it's gone. You can't use Twitter anymore. It's just not a viable mechanism. The best thing that you can do is find people that you trust, and you can go with that, right? Like, yeah, Dylan Burns. Like, Dylan Burns is on Twitter, but in that case, you're not really going to Twitter. You're going to Dylan Burns, you know? Just really, really, really bad. Vaush, pre-Elon Twitter checkmarks were not about authenticity. It was more like high school clicks. No, it wasn't. They were blue checks to distinguish people who were famous enough that others might want to impersonate them. It was a way of identifying journalists. You wouldn't get a blue checkmark if you were a random, like, internet shitposter, because that wasn't someone worthy of copying. Therefore, the blue check was indicative of some degree of authenticity. Oh my God, why are we talking about this? No, it's really bad out there, okay? Like, man, there's so much shit. For instance, like Netanyahu, in his response to the attack on Israel from Hamas, made a statement, and people were arguing over how many Hitler particles there were in that statement. Like, there was, because remember, there's no such thing as a perfect translation between languages, right? So if you're translating from Hebrew to English, there's not an objective translation, right? There are degrees of credibility, of validity. There were some interpretations of what he said were get out of Gaza, and some were saying like get out of the areas where Hamas is. And then some people said he said that he was going to reduce Gaza to a city of ruin, but then other people said that it wasn't that. But that's not even just a Twitter issue. That's like a broader issue, I guess. Hebrew is hard as hell. Well, it's different enough from English that it's probably a little bit more variability in the translation, you know, more terms that have kind of an artistic flourish to their shift. Did you see Azerbaijan came out in support of Israel? That's not surprising. Israel and Azerbaijan are on weirdly good terms. Several U.S. citizens have died following the attacks in Israel. Yeah, there was a whole like rave that people attended. Israel also has like a lot of visitors or a lot of tourists or whatever. Not surprising. Vaush, why can't we admit Hamas had to do this unfortunate attack to gain some semblance of freedom? Why is that so hard to speak in Jewish media? Geez, I wonder. Oh, I get it. Nazi. There we go. The Israel-Palestine shit always draws out the worst behavior from the community. I mean, that's not my community. I've never seen that chatter before in my life. So, you know, people come in here. Probably has like 2 chats in the past ever. What are your thoughts, Vaush, on using Zionism as a slur in criticize for Israel? The term Zionist, like criticizing a person for being Zionist, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, like, let's be real, 99% of the time when somebody says like they hate Zionists, they mean Jews, right? It's another one of those. It's the same with globalists. They did the same thing with globalists. Bankers, the term cabal. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is really common, so a lot of terms that would otherwise be acceptable in general usage get roped in, and you know, there's nothing wrong with saying I think Zionism is bad. The problem is you might then have to spend a lot of time explaining how you mean Zionism and not Jews, and that, I mean, that's just time wasted, right? Why would Iran be aligned with Hamas? Aren't they Sunni and Shia? I mean, Iran really doesn't like Israel, so I feel like you passed a point, it's almost immaterial. You shouldn't underestimate Hezbollah. They're by far the most powerful non-state actor. They beat the IDF in 2006 and have fought in Syria for over a decade. I mean, I guess I don't know that much about Hezbollah. Israel would not lose in a fight against Hezbollah. It's Israel. I guess I'd have to do some reading. Hezbollah beat the IDF in a defensive urban environment. Then invading Israel would not work since it would require them to be offensive and on plain ground. July War, and Israel is the second Lebanon War, a 34-day military conflict in Lebanon, northern Israel, and the Golan Heights. Principal parties were Hezbollah paramilitary forces and the IDF. The conflict was precipitated by the 2006 Hezbollah cross-border raid. They fired rockets at Israeli border towns as a diversion for an anti-tank missile attack and 2 armored Humvees patrolling the Israeli side of the border fence. The conflict is believed to have killed between 12 and 1,300 Lebanese people and 165 Israelis. It severely damaged Lebanese civil infrastructure and displaced approximately 1 million Lebanese and about 500,000 Israelis. Holy shit. Hezbollah claimed the war was a divine victory, while Israel considered the war a failure and a missed opportunity. Why? What did they lose? What are they unhappy they lost? Yeah, Hungamaster, I know that Israel's behavior does not help with regards to the anti-Semitism in the Middle East, but I think a lot of people also need to understand that just due to a variety of conditions, you know, there's also just a lot of Hitler particles in the Middle East, okay? That's not new. There were lots of Hitler particles in the 1400s in Western Europe, you know, that's not a totally unique geographical phenomena, but it's not all like, oh, well, Israel did this, you know? When Israelis say that if they stop fighting, they'll be eradicated by Arabs, that is true. That is a true statement. If Israel adopted a perfectly conciliatory stance towards all their neighbors, they would be swallowed and killed by many people who hate them around them. Now, that does not mean that Israel gets to wage infinity war on their neighbors. It's another like piece of the complexity. It's another thing to factor in. Yeah, we need to denazify the Arab world.